Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Today, we have Dr. Christine Kalmes with us and Dr. Paula Smith Benson with us. But before we get started on our streamed event about Sexual Awareness Month, I want to remind you all to like and follow us from wherever you're watching. Also, if you want to make a comment, you could do it from wherever you're watching and we'll see it in real time. So if you want to ask a question, please feel free to do that. Welcome, Dr. Kalmes and Dr. Smith Benson. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So what does that mean? Can you talk to us about this whole month of awareness?
Yes, so April is Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month, and it's really designed to bring awareness to sexual assault as a problem. So to educate the public and to provide support to sexual assault victims.
Absolutely. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see everyone back. Thank you for being with us again. Thank you, Christine. You're absolutely correct. And I'll just say that it's also an opportunity to educate and to share what life looks like after trauma. There is hope, there is recovery, there is a path forward. So it's just a great privilege that I have I call myself a survivor because I'm sort of in progress. But it's just great to be here and to be able to really get the message of hope out, and that the VA Maryland healthcare system is fully present with literally boots on the ground, making sure that we reach and teach and lift up as many people as possible.
So let's define sexual assault, like what that means, because I think a lot of people maybe think of one thing or two things, but don't have a full understanding of what sexual assault actually means. So can we define that?
Yeah, I would like to really focus on military sexual trauma, what that means. So MST, or military sexual trauma, is any unwanted sexual advance or harassment. It could include comments about an individual's body, requests for the person to engage in sexual activity, all the way up to forced sexual intercourse of some type. So it really does run the gamut or the spectrum, all the way from unwanted verbal attention all the way to an unwanted an act of sexual intercourse, and everything in between. The good thing about MST as defined by the VA is that it does not require any documentation. People do not have to have reported the event at all. All that we are asking is that you let a provider at the VA know that you experienced MST, and that will make you eligible for mental or physical health care related to your experience of MST, which is provided free of charge. So that's a pretty big benefit to individuals who've experienced MST.
Can you describe how MST is different, how it is different from sexual assault for civilians, why it's different for military people when it happens in the military?
So the definition of MST is really an experience that a service member had on active duty. It may be from a fellow service member. It could be from a stranger. It could even be from a spouse. So the perpetrator is not important. And the location of the event is not important. What is important is that the individual was serving on active duty. What we know is that for many service members, military sexual trauma occurred by a fellow service member, often of higher rank. The person may have been threatened with negative consequences, or sort of promised rewards. Consent does not, participation does not equal consent, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Also not uncommon for the individual to be unable to consent. So perhaps something was put in their drink, or they were intoxicated to the point where they were unable to provide consent. That would also qualify as MST. Finally, we know that many service members are strongly discouraged from reporting the experience for a variety of reasons. And this leaves them in a tricky situation, because often the perpetrator is someone that they have to deal with on an ongoing basis. And they, which is stressful. And then to not be able to receive the support and services they need afterwards can kind of add to that stress. Anything that you would add, Paula?
Yes, thank you so much. One thing that I do want to lift up in this space, and thank you very, very much for the question and for the response, is that MST, there's a myth that MST only occurs with female service members being the victim and male service members being the perpetrator. That is not a fact. That is a myth. Military sexual trauma is an experience for male and female veterans, and you can have male or female perpetrators. The last I checked, it was about approximately 1 in 10 male veterans that report MST, and about 1 in 3 female veterans that report the experience. Why is it so important? Why are the three of us so committed to getting on these platforms such as this? Because only about 35 to 40% of all veterans will come through the doors of a Veterans Administration hospital. So we are speaking to all veterans to get a message out to the broader audience, to include those 60 to 70% on average that may not come in. So the Veterans Health Administration offers treatment. I'm just echoing what Christine said, at no cost to the veteran. So part of our mission is to erase and eliminate the stigma or the shame that's around this topic, to broadly disclose it, but to also make sure that people know that help is available at no cost. That is so important. So that's all that I would add.
So the shame and the stigma of reaching out for help for males and females might be a big inhibitor. So what protections do male and female veterans have when they do reach out to the VA for help? You know, how can they be sure that their stories about what happened to them while in the military remain confidential?
Well, everything is kept confidential. We do make general notes in the medical record about visits and appointments, but the details of any particular individual's stories are not included to protect their confidentiality. So as a psychologist, that is one of the principles that is really important, is confidentiality, except in cases where someone's life is at risk or they report any type of abuse. But that's an excellent point. Confidentiality is an important concern.
Very much so. And that extends to the peer support specialists. We too have a duty to protect private and protected health information, with the exception of the things that Dr. Kalmas just stated. So the peer specialist staff is here to journey and to walk alongside veterans. And it is our ethical responsibility, it's our duty to keep things confidential. So I'm very grateful that that question was asked, because that can be a barrier to accessing care.
Well, that's why I asked it, because I know that many people are stymied by the shame and the stigma, and they are afraid that it might affect their benefits, or they are afraid they might lose something. So I guess what you're saying is there's everything to gain when they come in.
Absolutely. I would say that wholeness is available, to all. And that is our intention, to have an experience where we are restored back to wholeness, and that dignity and self-respect, agency, living a self-directed life where we're able to decide for ourselves and advocate on our own behalf. It's so empowering on this side of an experience that may have been disempowering, to be an active participant in my healthcare, to take charge of my life and my health and know that I'm supported. That is, I don't even have words to really describe that experience.
So let's talk about the veterans out there who have experienced MST and who have not come in. So they might be experiencing PTSD, or maybe be at risk for suicide, or maybe at risk for all kinds of things. So do you want to speak to those veterans out there who may think they're suffering alone because of this?
Right. As Paula mentioned, 1 in 3 female veterans and 1 in 10 male veterans report the experience of MST when asked directly through the VA. It's suspected that rates are even higher than that. So you certainly are not alone. And as was previously mentioned, you are eligible for mental health care related to MST, you're eligible free of charge, which is a huge benefit. If you suspect you may not be eligible for VA care, there are often circumstances where veterans who would not be eligible for care otherwise are still eligible for MST related care. So I do encourage you to come in. You can contact me. I will put my phone number in the chat and we can talk about how to get connected with care.
Oh, that's a great point, is how can veterans get connected to care, especially if they're not enrolled and they are not interacting with VA care.
Exactly. And that is one of my primary roles as MST coordinator, is to get all veterans, to make sure all veterans who've experienced MST are connected with the care that they need, and to walk them through the steps to get connected. I am hoping today to piggyback a little bit on your recovery journey, Paula, that we began talking about months ago.
Yes.
And I'm really interested in this because the last time we talked, you mentioned that you had an experience where you felt triggered in the last year or so, and that it kind of set you back in terms of your recovery. And what was particularly difficult about it was that the individual who you found who was the trigger is someone that you had to interact with on a regular basis.
Yes.
And I understand, though, that there was some recent resolution to this. And I'm wondering how that played out and how that has impacted how you're feeling now.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for bringing that up. So, yes, you're absolutely correct. I did experience a trigger. Sometimes people are not clear even what that word means. And what Dr. Kalmus is referring to is a particular experience that may increase the PTSD symptoms that one may be experiencing. So, first, I'd like to say that this recovery journey does not go in a straight line. It takes different paths. And once I started experiencing increased symptoms, one of my primary coping mechanisms in the past was avoidance. So if there was a person, a place, or a smell, or a remembrance of some kind that brought me back to that military sexual assault, I would avoid it. Detour, move to another state, whatever I needed to do, another neighborhood, but I removed myself. This time, I was not able to do so. So guess what happened? I had to tap into my internal strengths and resources that were available to me. And one of the first things that I decided to do was I actually confronted the person that was the trigger.
Wow.
And I walked up to them, knees shaking, hands sweating, sweat on the tip of my nose. And I just simply asked, do you recall the last interaction that we had? And the individual did. And I said, do you have a few moments? I would like to talk about how that experience was for me. So, to make a very long story short, we were able to connect, and the individual apologized and asked for forgiveness for activating something that he was unaware of. And I was able to give forgiveness. So I was able to release and let go of what no longer served me. And of course, I am actively engaged with the Trauma Recovery Center, and I have weekly trauma focused treatment, measurement based treatment to support me around this experience. And I'm happy to report I'm feeling so much better. One of my go-to coping mechanisms is food. So something would go on and I'd find myself eating emotionally. And after this incident occurred, I didn't realize that I was in that much distress until I stepped onto the scale and had gained 40 pounds. It happened so subtly. But interestingly, once I was able to lay down the emotional weight, I am happy to report since our last taping that I have lost 26 pounds. Because it really wasn't about what I was eating. It was about what was eating me. And once I was able to courageously seek additional treatment, And that was very hard. I felt like a failure. Honestly, I never thought I'd have to go back to the trauma treatment ever again. I said, "Oh, I'm over it. I'm good now." But I needed additional support. And I'm so grateful. And if I have to go back again, which I hope not, but if it happens, I will return again.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that experience.
You're welcome.
I want to just say how courageous it was for you to check in with that individual in a safe environment,
Yes.
right? And to get an affirming, apologetic response. Sometimes what's kind of difficult about a trigger is it can be something in the present environment that reminds you of something from your past, a situation that was traumatic or dangerous. And because that reminder is so strong, it can cause our mind and body to react as if we're experiencing another dangerous situation.
Absolutely.
And that can really cloud us from seeing the situation that's actually occurring before us really clearly, right? So sometimes we may make assumptions about the trigger that may be incorrect, or the other individual may not know that something that they said or did had us feeling a certain way, right?
Absolutely.
And so by checking in with that person, you gave them the opportunity to clarify their intention and apologize to you, which is wonderful. I also I want to point out the importance between what goes on in our physical body and what's going on for us mentally. So it's not uncommon for us to engage in behaviors that can impact our physical health, like overeating. And then that results in weight gain, and it can result in a lot of other physical health concerns. And I'm really glad that you have, by working through the mental part of it and emotional piece of it, you've been able to get your eating back on track.
Correct.
And lose the majority of the weight that you gained after that period.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I also think that this is a wonderful example of what you were talking about with recovery being nonlinear. So we can have this idea about recovery that, oh, I'm cured, I'm recovered, I'm not going to need any treatment. And that can really throw us when we have something unexpected come up in the environment. We might feel triggered and need to return to treatment. That is part of the recovery process, very much so. Now, you mentioned to me when we met recently that during this time, you actually received an important award at work. What was that like for you, and what was the award?
So I received an award at work from the secretary of the VA.
Wow.
And what I found interesting is that the award ceremony occurred in the midst of the trigger. So what was very fascinating to me is that my body was physically in the room. It really did happen. But I had no positive emotions around the event.
Wow.
So from my neck up, intellectually, I knew that this was a great honor and a wonderful privilege. But from the neck down, I did not feel any joy or any happiness or any positive emotions. So in working with my therapist, she said that what happened is called disassociation, where my emotions and my physical body were not in alignment. She also said that that happens sometimes during traumatic experiences as a protective factor, that our bodies often respond in that way. And what was also interesting is someone said, well, what exactly did they say that you did? I said, I have no idea, because
Wow.
my hearing went out and I could not hear what was being said. So
Right.
this body experience was a direct result of being triggered. So I actually have a photograph of the event. This was what was recommended in therapy. Get a picture. Make sure it's big enough where you can see it so that you can remind yourself of what occurred. What's interesting is I had some other positive experiences that have recently happened. You see, my face is smiling, my cheeks are going up. And guess what? I experienced happiness and joy.
That's wonderful.
My hearing didn't go out. My full body was able to experience the event. So I would love it, Dr. Kalmus, if you could shed some more light on this experience. I know I'm not by myself in having this dissociation.
Yeah, as your therapist mentioned, that's actually a way that our mind and body protect us from the full experience of the trauma, is to kind of disconnect emotionally, mentally from what's occurring. Sometimes people report that they're even outside of their body looking down as the event's occurring to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that when you're triggered, your body can react in a similar way. It sounds like yours did. And during that period, you were so distressed that you were not fully present at the award ceremony, which prevented you from even encoding that experience in your memory fully, right?
Yeah.
You weren't, all your senses weren't even there to take it in. And we also know that when people are trying to suppress negative feelings like anxiety, fear, anger, that they also can find that they're suppressing positive feelings. So it's not that we can just turn off the negative feelings. If we're going to turn off the feelings, we turn them all off, right? So that's a symptom, not being able to experience positive feelings. That is not uncommon among people who've experienced trauma. And it sounded like it really took away from these huge, really important events that occurred. I am really glad that you've been able to do some work to connect with the feelings afterwards, and hopefully keep that picture close by to remind you of that huge honor.
Yes, I have it close by. I would just like, Rosalia, could you just chime in a minute? Because you were in the room with me. Could you chime in that you can't even really tell? I mean, I'm assuming.
I was surprised hearing it just now. That
I was getting ready to say, did you know? Was there anything different about me? Did you know I was actually in distress in that room?
No, I did not know. You look just the same as every time I've seen you. I was actually a little surprised to hear that your hearing went out and you were disassociated because you were in an event that triggered you. So I would never have guessed.
And it wasn't the event that was the trigger. The event occurred during the period that I was triggered. The event did not trigger me. And I didn't even realize that this separation occurred until I got back to therapy. And I said, I had the weirdest thing happen. I said, I don't feel any joy. I know this is exciting, but I'm not feeling anything. I said, can you please help me with this? And then it was like, well, what did they say? I said, I don't know, because I can't remember. I didn't hear anything. And I did not realize either. I did not know this was happening real time. It was only after processing it with my therapist. Thank goodness for that. I had no idea.
Right.
So thank you for just providing your insight. I think that's important for family members and friends, that veterans may be in your presence in distress, and people may be completely and totally unaware.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think many veterans, because of the shame and confusion even at the symptoms, they do their best to present themselves like they are not in distress, right? Because this is something that's so difficult to talk about and even understand.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And what's coming up for me now is I am an Air Force veteran. So it's integrity first, excellence in all we do, and service before self. So that self part is sort of backburnered.
Yeah.
So it's putting on a mask. It's, soldiering up for some, depending on your branch of service, and presenting yourself as if everything is excellent, when in fact there's no integrity on the inside of the individual, because the outside presentation is not in alignment perhaps with the inside experience. That's why I want to lift these things up in the moment, because they could be happening right before your eyes. And we've all known each other now for over 3 years. And there's no signs that I was literally having a problem. Right. And it never occurred to me that I was having a problem. So what might that prevent me from doing? Asking for help, because I was unaware that I was having a problem. Therein lies the confusion.
Exactly. So what can family members do when their veteran is sort of acting a little off, but seems to be okay, but not really? So what can family members and loved ones notice first what's going on with their loved one? So what can they do?
First thing I'm going to chime in and say is just ask.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we really are waiting for somebody to just ask, and that says that we're being seen. I see you. Are you okay? I notice X, Y, and Z. How are you? And be willing to hold space for that veteran. And you may not get an answer, but just to be seen is helpful, even though we may not be able to articulate or describe the experience, but just to know I'm not invisible. Somebody sees me.
And I also think it communicates that that person cares.
Yes.
I care enough to ask you.
Yes.
Right? I think asking and bringing it up and holding the space is huge. Mm-hmm. I also think encouraging the person to connect with VA.
Yes.
And get services. Mm-hmm. Just to talk to someone, or even just go to their doctor, right? Mm-hmm. VA is very good about asking about mental health symptoms and problems. Mm-hmm. So encouraging the person to go see their primary care provider might be a great first step.
That's excellent. And I also want to add that we're very family friendly as well. We not only care about veterans, but we're concerned about families. So please feel free at your veterans' discretion and with their permission to come on in and perhaps attend an
Absolutely.
appointment or become more familiar with the environment. But we're very family friendly and we are here to welcome you when you come.
So let's talk about what we're doing in April to raise awareness about April being assault awareness and prevention. Are we encouraging people to do anything special?
Right. Well, last Tuesday, Paula and I gave out brochures at the Baltimore Main Hospital, and some of my counterparts gave out brochures and teal ribbons at the Perry Point campus and Fort Meade to try to raise awareness. We also encouraged all staff to wear teal. Teal is the universal color for Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month. So that was great and designed to raise awareness as well. And of course, with this Facebook Live, we're trying to raise awareness.
Absolutely. And the event was, it was just wonderful. It was just wonderful to connect with folks. People picked up information. They asked questions.
Yes.
And I even had a chance to connect with a few survivors and to encourage them. It was a very meaningful event. And I've got my teal pin on. So I found a pin that I absolutely love. So I try to wear this on most days just as a reminder.
That's great.
So, Christine, what is the phone number that people can call? I could type it into the box right now.
Yes, it is 410-350-5464.
To get, and can't veterans call the main number and just ask to be transferred to MST?
They could ask for the MST coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that appears on every place. We hope if anyone has questions out there that they will post them in the comment section from wherever you're watching. We see some folks who are watching. Thanks for the like that we got. Is there anything that I have not asked you about MST or sexual assault awareness and prevention that you think it's important for family members and or veterans to know specifically? We were talking about the body before. So can those veterans who come in for mental health care for MST get also physical medical care if it's related to their MST?
Yes, if it's directly related to their experience of MST, they can get physical health care as well.
And I just wanted to always add, if there's a medical or mental health emergency, please call 911 right away. And if you're having thoughts of suicide, then please call the Veterans Crisis Line. And that's 988 and press option 1. Again, 988 and press option number 1.
Thank you so much.
In the
Paula.
You're welcome.
So I want to thank you ladies for joining us today. Thank you everyone who's watching. Thanks for the like. Remember, it doesn't matter what your gender is. If you have experienced military sexual trauma and you're not enrolled in VA healthcare, you are still eligible for care. And to call Christine Kalmes, and Dr. Paula Smith Benson, who is a survivor, is also a peer support specialist working with other veterans to help them through their healing journey. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you soon again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.